The flagship Mercedes, known worldwide as the S-Class, has been around for over 50 years, with its history beginning in 1973 with the launch of the W116 model. Essentially, this flagship sedan from Stuttgart set the tone and became the founder of an entire class of vehicles in the F segment, which later saw the inclusion of other German brands. However, in 2015, Mercedes made an unexpected move by adding the word Maybach to the most expensive and prestigious versions of the S-Class, a nod to the revived pre-war brand that never quite took off in the 2000s. But long before the Germans experimented with this approach, the Japanese from Toyota had already taken a similar path. However, they didn't revive anything. Instead, they created a separate brand to compete with the big German trio, primarily Mercedes, especially in one of the most lucrative markets, the United States. Today, we'll look back at how the Lexus LS came to be and why many consider this sedan better than the S-Class itself, no matter how sacrilegious that may sound. The beginning. It's no secret that back in the 1970s, the Japanese were doing everything possible not just to enter the US and European markets but to conquer them. This was no easy task, even in the regular car segments, despite the fact that after the 1973 energy crisis, many Americans were forced to discover the world of affordable Japanese cars, realizing they were not only cheap but also practically indestructible. However, in the luxury sedan segment, which existed even during the Great Depression, Toyota only had a niche model like the Century, strictly for the domestic market. Hypothetically, it could have been converted to left-hand drive and sold in the States, but the Japanese rightly understood that a completely different car was needed for that market. Moreover, the Toyota brand was globally associated with reliable and practical, but simple, cars. Understanding this, Toyota's chairman, Eiji Toyota, towards the end of his tenure in 1983, announced his intention to create the best car in the world, with no constraints on time or financial resources. In terms of specifications, this meant a top speed of 250 km per hour, a drag coefficient, CX, of no more than 0.29, and cabin noise levels not exceeding 58 decibels at 100 km per hour. The project, dubbed F1, Flagship 1, was approached with great seriousness. In 1985, Toyota conducted market research and focus groups to understand the tastes and preferences of potential buyers. Designers involved in the project even lived in Laguna Beach, California, while engineers tested prototypes with Toyota badges on US roads and German autobahns. After several years of development, the leadership concluded that the future flagship needed its own name, not just a model, but a separate brand. A new dealership network in the US was also necessary to emphasize the brand's independence from Toyota. Over 200 names were considered, with the Lexus initially chosen but later discarded due to associations with Alexis Carrington from the popular 1980s TV show Dynasty. Ultimately, the new flagship was launched under the name Lexus, which many interpret as a combination of luxury and elegance. Another theory suggests it stands for Luxury Exports to the U.S., though officially, the Japanese claimed it simply sounded good and conveyed the brand's concept. Thousands of engineers and designers, totaling around 4,000 employees, spent $1 billion developing 450 prototypes over several years. In January 1989, exactly 36 years ago, the Lexus LS was unveiled at the Detroit Auto Show. Market sales began in September of that year, and by January 1990, Car and Driver named the LS 400 one of the 10 best cars of the year. This successful launch of both the brand and its first model in the premium F segment was backed by compelling arguments. Luxury, elegance, and a V8. Since we're talking about a luxury sedan that must be fast, let's start with the engine. The Japanese developed nearly 1,000 pre-production prototypes of an aluminum V8, which later became the legendary 1S FE. The 4.0-liter, 250 horsepower V8 was mounted on hydropneumatic mounts to reduce vibrations. The transmission was a 4-speed automatic with electronic control, praised for its responsiveness. The suspension featured double wishbones, with an optional air suspension that adjusted stiffness and ride height based on load and speed. All this in 1989, 2 years before the launch of the W140 S-Class, while Mercedes was still selling the W126, introduced in 1979. Lexus LS 400 looked almost like an S-Class, drove almost like an S-Class, and was quieter than an S-Class. And who cared that it lacked heritage? It cost as much as an E-Class. Eddie Alterman, car and driver, December 29, 2017. The LS 400 didn't have a V12 like the Mercedes 600SL or BMW 750iL, but neither did the Mercedes at the time of the LS's launch. With 250 horsepower, the LS wasn't far behind the 560SL, 279 horsepower, or the 750iL, 300 horsepower, and was significantly more fuel efficient. It accelerated to 100 km per hour in about 8 seconds and reached a top speed of 250 km per hour, making it a contender even on German autobahns. The combination of a comfortable cabin, a silky 250 horsepower V8 with dual overhead camshafts, and almost supernatural attention to detail makes the LS 400 at home in any company. Car and driver, November 1990. First impressions. Lexus sounded different from Toyota and was sold in separate dealerships, so it had to look different too. Many contemporaries saw echoes of Bruno Sacco's W126 in the large headlights, chrome grille, and heavy rear end, but the LS had its own identity. The design was finalized by May 1987, and while it shared some traits with the W126, it wasn't a copy. The front bumper featured horizontal turn signals, the rear lights were more modern, and the silhouette was less rigid, with a lighter C-pillar and minimal gaps for better aerodynamics. Lexus was substantial but not visually heavy like the BMW E32, and distinctive enough to stand out among American cars. It was unmistakably not a Mercedes or a Toyota. This convinced the public, with nearly 43,000 units sold in just a few months in 1990. By 1991, Lexus had sold over 71,000 sedans, making it the best-selling imported luxury car in the US. This was a resounding success in a market dominated by BMW, Mercedes, Audi, and domestic brands. By 1992, Lexus had sold nearly 93,000 cars, all thanks to the LS 400. "I can't believe this car is so good compared to expensive cars," a comment heard repeatedly during our test. Car and driver, November 1990. Interior and features. The interior was more traditional for a Japanese brand, with familiar Toyota traits, but the quality of materials and luxurious trim, including wood veneer selected from 24 types, made it clear this wasn't just a Toyota. The dashboard featured an innovative Optitron display, with illuminated needles that lit up upon ignition. The instrument cluster was more modern than the pre-facelift W140's rudimentary odometer. The steering wheel was adjustable in height and reach via electric motors, and the rear-view mirror automatically dimmed. The car also came with a Nakamichi audio system and a hands-free cellular phone. However, American journalists criticized the Lexus for its abundance of plastic and lackluster dynamics, though they still noted it was unexpectedly good compared to its prestigious rivals. The unexpectedly part is debatable, as prototypes had been tested worldwide, covering over 4 million kilometers. This meticulous testing was key to the LS's success. By carefully studying competitors, the Japanese followed their own brief to create a car with excellent high-speed handling, comfort, quietness, and fuel efficiency. And, importantly, it was very reliable. Lexus may not be the car you want to arrive in, but it's definitely the car you'd want to drive. Car and driver. 35 years ago in a comparative test with 3 luxury sedans, the LS took third place, beating the Bentley Turbo R and trailing only the Mercedes 560 SL and BMW 750 IL. With a base price of $35,350, the Lexus was half the price of the Mercedes, attracting a certain audience and allowing the Japanese sedan to become a fox in the henhouse. The legacy the pattern was set, Honda as Acura, Nissan as Infiniti, and Toyota as Lexus built reliable, refined, and expensive cars to reshuffle the luxury car deck. While there were differences in dynamic tone among the three, none had a real history or inherited trophies. What they had was reliability. They revealed something important about luxury car buyers. These people value their money, time, and service. The first Acura, Infiniti, and Lexus, especially Lexus, had excellent and attentive dealers, and the cars weren't finicky or expensive to maintain like their German counterparts. They simply pampered and reassured. Eddie Alterman, car and driver, December 29, 2017. But no one rested on their laurels. In the fall of 1992, an updated Lexus LS was introduced, just 2 years after its launch. The Japanese didn't sit idle, watching the new S-Class debut. Instead, they refined their flagship, responding to owner feedback with over 50 changes. This version, designated UCF10, remained in production until 1994. The next generation, UCF20, was essentially a facelift, distinguishable by smaller front turn signals and a split rear light design. The third generation, 2000-2006, bore a stronger resemblance to the W140 S-Class, especially at the rear, though the fourth generation, 2006-2017, moved away from this similarity. Unfortunately, while Lexus sold well, it couldn't match the sales volumes of the W221 S-Class and eventually lost ground in the US market. The king is dead? More like the times have changed. However, this doesn't negate the fact that the ambitious technical specifications set by AG Toyota 40 years ago were brilliantly realized in the first ever Lexus. It was not only as reliable as any Toyota but also more prestigious, simply because it bore a different name.